Now, getting back to Chicago. The first big show they ever had here in the amphitheater, when I was with the Assassins, I managed them in the main event. It was a sellout. I went from there to Markoff and Poffel, took them to main events, and we won. Then I was with Black Jack Lanza, probably one of the most successful wrestlers I've ever had. I headlined Sox Park. I headlined Soldiers Field. I've headlined almost every amphitheater show they've had. I've headlined Hammond. I was the main event. I was the one that packed them in with my boys.
Raymond Lewis Heenan was born in Chicago on November 1st, 1944. His father, Robert Heenan, who was a railroad worker, left his mom when he was less than a year old, so he was raised by his mother and grandmother. He was known at a young age for his wittiness and sense of humor, but according to Heenan, his mother, whom he had always called Millie, was the funniest person he ever met in his life, and looked like a combination of Lucille Ball and Bette Davis. In their neighborhood, there was a professional wrestler named Zach Melkoff who lived down the street. Zach served as a Chicago Park District officer during the day and had a unique routine of working out at the beach with rocks, lifting big ones to stay in shape. To Bobby, a 10-year-old kid at the time, Zach seemed like a huge and formidable figure. With cauliflower ears and a dark tan from frequenting the beach, Zach had a rough and tough appearance. One day, Zach approached Bobby's mother and asked if he could take a group of the neighborhood kids to a marigold wrestling event. Seated in the front row of the bleachers, Bobby was instantly captivated by the spectacle. He recalled seeing a wrestler named Johnny Case, who later became a good friend and a travel companion to Japan. Johnny was also an educator and a president in the Illinois school system, and played the role of a heel. The most captivating aspect for Bobby that night was witnessing how Johnny Case would control the crowd. When he asked for silence, the audience made noise, and when he instructed them to speak, they fell silent. Bobby was amazed at how a man could command a crowd and evoke excitement, especially when soaring through the air. Right there, he became hooked. Wrestling became something he felt compelled to pursue, despite having previously harbored dreams of becoming a baseball player and being a huge Cubs fan, only living a few miles from Wrigley Field. After Marigold Television went off the air, there wasn't much wrestling that Bobby could recall. At the time, he lived in an apartment hotel which his mother managed. Him and his buddies would enter the lobby and engage in tag team matches, taking bumps on the furniture, creating their own show based on what they had witnessed on television. In 1959, Vince McMahon Sr. commenced running his TV show in Chicago, collaborating with Fred Collar, the local promoter. The show originated from Bridgeport, Connecticut, airing for 2 hours from midnight on Saturday until 2 a.m. the following morning. In awe, Bobby witnessed the likes of Johnny Valentine, Buddy Rogers, Bearcat Wright, the Kangaroos, and the Graham Brothers. It differed from the wrestling he had watched in 1954 at the Marigold. Though still on television and not live, it provided an up-close view of these wrestlers. The fascination persisted. This is what Bobby had inspired to do, yet he remained unsure of how to achieve it. Upon turning 15, the hotel managed by his mother was sold. Moving in with his aunt, who was battling cancer, him and his mother moved to Indianapolis until she underwent surgery and his mother could secure employment. Having been held back twice, Bobby found himself in the 8th grade for the 3rd year, attributing it to poor attendance. He preferred taking the bus downtown, sleeping in the tents in the sports department at the local Marshall Fields, rather than attending school. School held little appeal, as he couldn't fathom the necessity of learning about events like the Boston Tea Party or historical figures like Magellan. He simply wanted to watch wrestling. A year after relocating to Indianapolis, his aunt passed away, but Bobby and his mother chose to remain there. One of Bobby's closest friends was Tom Mathis, a disc jockey affiliated with WIFE Radio in Indianapolis. It was through him that Bobby organized his inaugural wrestling event. This event took place on a Saturday night at St. Rita's Boxing Gym in Indianapolis, with Bobby donning a mask and adopting the persona of the Avenger. At that point, he was not part of the wrestling industry and remained uninformed about the inner workings of the ring. The scheduled match was against Tom, recognized as one of the WIFE good guys. Entering the ring, Bobby delivered a promotional speech, accompanied by Scott Goodwin, an old friend, acting as their manager. The entourage included a couple of girls, a spectacle reminiscent of Gorgeous George's. Attired in a mask, snug wrestling pants, and boots fashioned from old hockey skates minus the blades, he also wore a jacket that resembled a stolen shower curtain from a local hotel. Practice sessions occurred in a spacious ring provided by Champ Chaney, an Indianapolis policeman involved in youth boxing. All proceeds from the concessions were donated to the local boxing program. The venue, though small, accommodated a crowded audience of 50 people, creating an enjoyable atmosphere. The crowd favored Tom, expressing their disdain for Bobby and his entourage. The match consisted of 2 out of 3 falls, with Bobby putting Tom over. He retained the mask, as the following week he needed to set up equipment and preferred to keep his identity as the Avenger concealed. Facing financial constraints, Bobby dropped out of school, never completing the 8th grade. He embarked on a series of jobs to support both himself and his mother, including roles as an usher at a theater, a clerk at a hardware and department store, a milkman, and a car jockey at a Ford dealership. It was during this period he received the call for wrestling. While at the dealership, Bobby held a second job at the Indianapolis Coliseum, serving as a stagehand responsible for setting up shows. Bulk Estes, the wrestling promoter at the Coliseum, arranged cards featuring notable names such as Cowboy Bob Ellis, Dick the Bruiser, Wilbur Snyder, the Shire Brothers, and Ray Stevens. Ray Stevens became a significant influence and close friend during the time. They not only wrestled each other, but also had opportunities for Bobby to manage him. Ray's ability to take a bump and his dynamic in-ring style with flowing blonde hair made him an exciting figure. Bobby also formed a connection with the original Sheik from Detroit. Despite the Sheik's intimidating appearance and fire-throwing antics, he looked out for Bobby. After a few months, Bobby acquainted himself with Russ Leonard, the publisher of Big Time Wrestling magazine. On Tuesday nights, he hitchhiked to the Armory, where he sold programs from 6 to 7. Subsequently, he assisted wrestlers with their bags, earning a bit of money. Following this, he sold Cokes until 8:30, when the matches began. Bobby stashed his Coke tray behind a door, adorned a sweater reading Championship Wrestling, and walked wrestlers to the ring as a second, earning $5 for each appearance. During the matches, he would return, shed the sweater, and resume selling Cokes. Post-match, he escorted one wrestler back and brought out the next, forming their routine. At one point, he even washed the Sheik's car for an additional $5. With a $52 monthly mortgage at the age of 16, Bobby felt a sense of financial freedom. As time progressed, Bobby found himself increasingly involved in the wrestling business. He took on various roles such as setting up the ring at the Coliseum, carrying jackets, and serving as a second around the ring. By the age of 17, he started working spot shows around Indianapolis, eagerly immersing himself into the wrestling world. On January 10, 1965, while working at the Ford dealership, he received a call from Dick the Bruiser instructing him to be at the local television station Channel 4 on Tuesday afternoon for interviews. Though uncertain about the purpose, he was thrilled until the Bruiser referred to him as Bobby, a name borrowed from Buddy Rogers' manager Bobby Davis. Despite the mix-up, he followed the Bruiser's instructions. After that, he was no longer known as Ray and would now be known as Bobby Heenan. Upon arrival, he found Bruiser and the tag team known as the Assassins, comprised of Joe Tommaso and Guy Mitchell, who wore masks. The Bruiser decided to appoint Bobby as the manager for the Assassins. Bruiser instructed them to be at the Holiday Inn on Highway 31 at 6 p.m. for a trip to Louisville. With no limos or first-class service, they embarked on a journey with the Bruiser, Wilbur Snyder, Guy, and himself in the car. During the ride, Bruiser and Wilbur engaged in a conversation using Carney language, a code unfamiliar to Bobby at the time. Pondering his purpose for the trip, he counted cows, uncertain about his role as a manager. Upon arrival in Louisville, Bruiser and Wilbur decided to initiate Bobby into the wrestling business. Bruiser handed him a mask, instructing him to put it on and emphasizing the staged nature of the matches. Bobby was warned against revealing the secrets and informed that any breach would result in severe consequences.